Welcome to my channel Buzz. Authorities are looking into the death that Gene Hackman and his spouse are providing an updated chronology regarding when Gene Hackman captivated audiences with his TV screens for more than 40 years, but his final years were filled with, he didn't appear on red carpets in secret, refused to participate in interviews, and never provided a final farewell to the world that changed. Suddenly, his name turned him into a legend, appeared in the news once more, but not because he was returning, but for a reason. His odd death question is far darker. Emerged, but one man came out to clear Christopher Hackman's son, without any doubts, who avoided being in the spotlight. His entire existence has shown something. Startling revelations from him. Let's discover the responsibilities of a developing career. Did you always aspire to be an actress, Gene? Well, I did, but I didn't want to in private. Tell anyone, since I felt embarrassed if I believed that perhaps that was what it was. An area in which Hackman's work, a small number of actors helped Hollywood take off. Have foresee when he initially began was merely another performer vying for portions and attempting to attract attention. But as his time went on, his talent and diligence paved the way for greater and better likelihood that the more success he had, that he might devote more attention to performing. But months of grueling days on film sets, being away from home and having a routine that never let up, gradually withdrew him from his family when he first started working. He tied the knot with Gene, who was already married. Marriage to Faye Maltz in 1956, a long time before. Did anyone know his name in their marriage? Began with affection, encouragement, and she supported him while he worked for years. To succeed as an actor after having children, their family grew, and Gene had more to consider than his work, discussing their 3 children together. 1 son, 2 daughters, and his son, Elizabeth and Christopher. His daughters. And as Gene pushed, Leslie appeared. Difficult to advance in Hollywood during those early. Gene made every effort to balance his life at home and at work, but as his career removed the increasing demands on his time, role after role, he watches movie after movie, increase the amount of time spent away from home. He always took trips to new locations, movies in various cities, and hardly had briefly spending time with his family when he did return home. He was typically exhausted from spending so much time on his head was packed with characters from scripts and career decisions that leave little room for enjoying himself with his wife and children. Faye Maltz made every effort to maintain. She reared their kids jointly and showed them care, and encouraged Gene from a distance. Distance, despite the space gap, them continued to widen, and she had wed a man who supported her. But over time, she discovered that she had a spouse whose thoughts and feelings were absorbed with his job. Their children developed up with a well-known father who was admired, and though not always present, he was loved and respected them. But his work frequently took precedence. As the years went by, the strain on their marriage grew too burdensome, due of the love that kept them close. At first, wasn't sufficient to reduce the distance that has developed between their connection by the 1980s. Couldn't be resolved following 30 years of Gene and Faye decided to end their marriage. In 1986, their divorce was formalized it ended a significant portion of Faye's life. For Gene, it provided access to, not long after the divorce, something new. When Gene first met Betsy Arakawa, she was much. They were younger than Gene, yet they clicked. That soon became serious. She didn't originate from Hollywood, which distinguished her from numerous individuals he had known for. She played classical piano for many years with her interests and aspirations, and she came upon him as more than just a well-known performer, she observed. The two grew closer to him personally, and unlike his previous, Gene was in love again, marriage. Where his professional life had been, Gene was in a whole different place. By the time he married Betsy, this time, he wasn't the same individual in 1991 who had, when he allowed his job to take over his life, he was older, wiser, and more knowledgeable. About personal connections were very important. Betsy brought Gene a new sense of serenity. She was always kind and understanding. She understood him when he needed her, and never attempted to divert his attention from. She was a human companion to him at work. He had someone to turn to when Hollywood turned into too strong, and their bond didn't originate from the struggles of a young performer who is trying to obtain attention. It hinged on the idea that there was more to life than fame and accomplishments. Over the years, Jean reduced the number of movie parts he took on, started a car, and spent more days at home, more concerned with his world than ever before. By at that time, his kids were grown up, and despite the fact that he wasn't present for them as they may have desired him, he worked hard because he loved them deeply, into repairing those connections, being more and compensating for the time he had spent too many years with Betsy. Far longer than his initial union with Fahad experienced the time when his fame was frequently abandoned in its ascending shadow. But Betsy revealed his more subdued, quiet moments. She remained with him while he started filming some of his last roles, to abandon the performance and leave. Leaving Hollywood entirely, the decisions that influenced his relationships from an early age. Delivering both positive and challenging occasions, he gained notoriety as an actor, but more when he discovered that prosperity and fame didn't signify as much as their loved ones and cherish their love for one another was so intense that death was unable to separate them. Los Angeles authorities are currently investigating fatality, have been providing additional information regarding their inquiry into the fatalities of Gene Hackman, an actor, and his spouse Gene. The well-known actor Hackman died from cardiac condition a full week following the virus in their home killed the wife. Authorities in New Mexico stated on Friday, March 2, 2025, when he most likely didn't even recognize her absence because his Alzheimer's was so severe that then heart issues. The inquiry was whether he knew that Miss Hackman had already away, and I believe that it's challenging to respond to this question. However, I can inform you that he was ahead of Gene's wife. Betsy was 95 years old. Arakawa was discovered deceased at the age of 65. In the days following February 26th, everyone couldn't figure out how they perished, because it wasn't a crime, according to the police, and fast tests revealed that it wasn't carbon poisoning from monoxide. Insofar as we are aware of, both people checked for carbon monoxide and came up negative. Well, City Fire ran testing before the New Mexico residents shared what they did that resulted in a straightforward but depressing explanation. Betsy most likely passed away. Initially from a rare illness she contracted from rodents, followed by Gene's cardiac death. The leading cause of mortality is sickness. In the countryside, he appeared to be unable to assistance after she died. A physician, Victor Whedon, a death researcher, but stated, "I didn't work on this case. Think that they have actually figured out what genuinely occurred here," he added, and it felt like such a great mystery to all of the country where Betsy was last spotted. Events on February 11th, 2025. She sent a late IST email with a massage, headed to a grocery store in the morning, spent the afternoon at Santa Fe, and then visited a pet food store and a drugstore. Santa Fe County Sheriff Adan's store. According to Mendoza, she entered the neighborhood where she and Gene resided at 5:15 p.m. He stated that the people investigating it and finding nothing further, signals or indications that she is acting in any way. Subsequent to February 11th, thus, they believe that's the physician who examined her when she passed away. Body suggested that she may have been experiencing before she died. She was ill with the virus. From February 17 to February 18, Gene's a pacemaker is a small device that assists. His heart demonstrated that it was focusing on the 17th later. CCH oddly displayed his atrial fibrillation as a type of heartbeat on the 18th. And that was the final instance in which it captured any information based on this. The primary Heather Gerald is a physician who examines corpses, stated that it's reasonable to believe Gene most likely passed away on February 18th. On February 26th, a worker arrived to perform ordinary household tasks, were unable to enter, and dialed a security. Mendoza representative claimed to have witnessed two individuals sleeping on the workers' floor within the house, called 911, and informed the individual on the phone. Unsure of whether they were breathing, he and a colleague informed the police later, which they rarely encountered. The residents and those who hadn't spoke with them for almost 2 weeks prior to Gene was discovered by the cops that day. In the Betsy, in a bathroom in the front hallway in a cupboard, they also discovered a dead dog. That dog was a Kelpie mix that Betsy had picked up from Gruta Veterinary Hospital, named Zen. February 9th, following some sort of care, the sheriff stated that he believed Perhaps that was the cause of the dog's death, and they were checking on Xena in particular to determine the cause of the deaths of two other canines were discovered alive within the residence, with a doctor outdoors on February 27th, completed thorough inspections of Betsy's trousers and bodies that the investigators wrote in. The couple and their dog's paper had long been deceased when on February 28th, the worker discovered them. Their bodies didn't appear at first. Why they passed away, but they did demonstrate it was not caused by poisoning from carbon monoxide. According to the sheriff, the preliminary inspections also discovered no indications of harm on either of eventually from something outside of them. According to Heather Gerald, both died. Gene's death occurred due to natural causes, from Alzheimer's to heart disease. To make matters worse, he disclosed Betsy's. The cause of death was high-risk pulmonary syndrome, an uncommon substance found in rodents' droppings that have the potential to be fatal. While the events leading up to his passing have garnered a lot of media attention, and conjectures regarding the latest revelations from his son are quickly attracting notice, providing additional details on what did he say after his father passed away. Let us ascertain Christopher Hackman, Gene's revelations' only son, had always avoided the public eye, staying away from the focus that followed his father, but in every way occurring and people becoming more Christopher, intrigued, raised his voice and shared his knowledge of his father's final days, particularly their last conversation. Christopher stated their final the discussion took place in late January 25, a few weeks prior to Gene's death. Distance, he recalled his father's feeble voice, but still distinct in his thoughts, unlike the claims claiming that his Alzheimer's disease was terrible. That they discussed family, reflected on the past and made plans. Regarding the future, Gene stated he desired to be nearer to Christopher, his children and grandchildren, acknowledging that his hectic acting career has prevented him from. Christopher mentioned his father from family, regretted the moments he had missed and wished to make amends while he was still. Did Christopher feel hopeful after the conversation that they may strengthen their bond back up? But Gene, only a few weeks later, Betsy and they were discovered dead in their New Mexico home, and their family was taken aback, and everyone else who wasn't Christopher pleased with the absence of an obvious data or the manner in which the news depicted his father's health, saying, in their most recent conversation, Jean didn't seem to, his mental state was severely declining. Therefore, he requested a thorough examination of what preceded their dying in search of the truth, and certain that his father's memory was honored. Appropriately, what Christopher shared gave the story a personal touch, demonstrating the complexity of family ties, particularly when combined with fame, and people carefully observing as the cops kept looking into the Hackman. Everyone was reminded by the family's story how it might be challenging to age and cope with illness and maintain family ties. Christopher's disclosure of his side. Many items revealed the private conflicts behind his father's well-known Hollywood name. What had grown even more disturbing was what Christopher Hackman, his son, revealed that claimed to have received an odd phone call from his dad a few days prior to Gene's passing. Christopher described the talk as odd, and his father's voice trembled with uneasiness, and Gene didn't state that directly, though. He feared Christopher would notice that he was anxious about something that was going to happen, only deepened the mystery. In contrast to numerous children of celebrities who utilize their parents' ability to attract attention, Christopher chose to live a tranquil life. Didn't mention his father's birth in 1960 to Faye Maltz and Gene Hackman. Christopher's first wife was raised primarily without his dad due to Gene's work, become as well known as Gene Rose in Hollywood's marriage ended, and Christopher's early years were spent by himself with his mother despite the years past. They never quite came close. Once more, people hardly ever saw Christopher with Gene, and the two were rarely seen in together in public when Gene claimed he was performed in 2004. Many believed he would spend his final years forming a relationship with his son, but that didn't appear to occur. Not where anyone could see what, anyway. Christopher mentioned that there was substantially more distressing activity in a statement on his father's last hours. Heshered Christopher for the first time, stated that recalling the phone call wasn't like any they'd ever had, claimed that his father's voice sounded virtually. Gene continued saying that he was paranoid, Things like "you should exercise caution" and "I don't believe I can prevent it from occurring." Christopher repeatedly acknowledged that he didn't understand the words in their entirety back then, but he now feels that his father was attempting to alert him to, in the weeks before to his death, something Gene withdrew from those he avoided, former acquaintances and those he had known for a long time. Despite the fact that he formerly loved, he drove over the countryside. He hardly left his property in New Mexico. According to the neighbor, Gene expressed feeling, observed or followed without providing an explanation. Why Christopher believes his father may felt that something negative was approaching. But what was it that terrified Gene Hackman so much? Let's hope that additional research will make the truth known. Even to Gene, the youngest daughter of Hackman, raised her voice. Regarding her father's health medically in the months prior to his death, Leslie, who was 58 years old, stated the family was still attempting to understand everything, as there was no indication that there was a problem with her father. Despite his advanced age, prior to his death, he was in excellent condition, she added, that her dad hadn't had any significant procedures. In the previous few months, Hello been practicing yoga and Pilates, and he continued doing that multiple times every week. She continued by saying that he was healthy, so it wasn't shocking that he died because he was 95 years old and she lived in. She said that California had been it's been a couple months since she last heard or saw from her reserved father, despite the fact that we were close. But I hadn't spoken to you for a few months to them, but everything was typical, and everything was. The family was still doing well, she claimed, awaiting word from the cops regarding precisely what took place and when they passed away, since the county sheriff's office in Santa Fe stated that their remains had been in the home for a minimum of 1 day prior to deputies discovered them dead as a myth, and after the Gene was the highest paid performer of his day, a substantial amount of money, and built up a net worth $80 million, and who will get it? Let's find the revelation through his money, behind his will that continues to worry about his children in particular. The will of Christopher Gene Hackman. Gene, the 3 kids of Hackman are getting prepared to battle in court regarding the actor's $62 million or $80 million estate. According to the Daily Mail, Hackman abandoned all of his late wife Betsy, money and belongings. It was unclear if Arakawa's 3 children, Christopher, Elizabeth, Gene, and his bequest would help Leslie Ann. 5-year-old Hackman created Arakawa, who was 65, as the lone recipient of his estate. 995, and the last time he modified his according to the British will in 2005 Broadcasting Corporation. However, children from his initial Faye Maltz's marriage could have legal ramifications, opportunity to inherit his property. The Mala claimed that Andrew M. was employed by Christopher Katzenstein, an attorney with knowledge of estates and trusts, indicating that he intended to contest the will. Children arrive under California law immediately following the spouse when someone passes away. Those who are still alive charge believe that Arakawa most likely passed away the week prior to Hackman's death. They were able to be crucial in any legal battle if, before him, Arakawa died, Hackman's children could demonstrate the will didn't matter. Anyway, Hackman remarked, Arakawa's own will would receive all of it, but if they passed away within 90 days of one another's funds, and everything would be placed in a trust and then to charity following medical expenses. The couple, who were married in 1991, didn't live in New Mexico and had a prenuptial agreement, where your joint possessions are divided, causing even more chaos now that they're both gone. The 30M zone showed obtaining payment from the performer, who was not the star of the French Connection, not feasible for his children because they were his remaining closest living relatives. However, why wouldn't Hackman include his? Could it be that he had children in his will because of his challenging history? Gene Hackman had a difficult relationship with his father. His father, Eugene Ezra Hackman, was a reserved man who didn't show his affection. When Gene was a young boy, he publicly thought that nothing he accomplished was good most of the time. He worked hard to make money for his father, happy of himself, waiting for a kind remark or a smiling. But his dad wasn't there. Severe, and some would argue that he adhered to his. He didn't want to sit at a distance and talk to his son about his thoughts instead of desired obedience, power, and discipline. This created a calm environment without any arguments. wall between them, and its size only increased. During his childhood, Gene Hackman did say it was mother who noticed something unique in him and encouraged him to try engaging in conversation with men. Beginning in 2011, Bonnie's Star and Clyde related an incident in which she brought him to the cinema when he was young and expressed a desire to meet you. She did mention that he told her to do that someday. I would have been 10 years old then. Parents' statements to their children don't always stick, but occasionally you get it. What your parents want you to do. Regretted that my mother was never able to see me behave, and I regret that. But that's how things transpired. Hackman clarified that his mother didn't see his roles as he played a minor role in Bonnie and Clyde, as reported by a Los Angeles newspaper. The actor Gene's mother's story died in a fire at St. Ed. He also had a cigarette that was still burning. Stated that he had reconciled with his father prior to his father's passing. In the same man's quarterly speech, he hoped his mom could have kept an eye on him. In 1970, I never performed for my father. Scenario involving an academic and his former dad. That film gave him his first nomination for an Oscar for Best Supporting as. Gene grew older. The actor discovered how to stand on his own, yet he also maintained his distant sentiments when he was only 16. He was expelled from his house he was also deeply impacted by the time when he had to go, but he didn't go back, had to fend for himself without assistance, and establish a life without a family to support. It strengthened him and made him cautious about years later, allowing people to become too close. It seemed like his past when he became a father still hindered him. He had 3 children, males, his first wife, but as he was mostly away from home due to his hectic profession, it wasn't only about work at the time, but he was also unaware of his upbringing, how to provide his children with a loving and affectionately, as his father never appeared. He didn't know how to communicate it with him, love, because he never experienced it himself. His father had abandoned him, and in how he carried out an action akin to his children in the future, as well as a new finding. In the inquiry into the actor Gene's death, despite those investigating Gene's deaths, Betsy, Hackman's wife, was informed by a court that they were unable to post images of their bodies as of right now, per fresh court documents that were filed on March 17th, granted a request a temporary approval. On March 11th, by an individual in charge of their request from the estate of a deceased couple, Santa Fe's First Judicial Court County, in order to prevent medical examiners from the sheriff's office displaying pictures records from police body cameras or videos regarding their demise. It additionally blocked the autopsy results are released, indicating death investigation provides images of within the Hackman residence and any deceased creatures. The court arranged a hearing in person on March 31st to determine if this block should be kept. Pursuing an initial injunction, attorney C.T. Summer has asked that ordering Julia Peters, who was employed by Hackman and his spouse's Udall law firm's estate through the summer. According to the filing, it was necessary to safeguard the deceased couple's estates and their right to privacy, highlighting the Hackman was very concerned about maintaining their life in private and took decisive action to make sure it remained that way in spite of all the disputes pertaining to his passing. And will Gene Hackman leave a lasting legacy? Gene Hackman's legacy. Well done, legacy. Our community lost to Hollywood's great Gene Hackman's mark. Unbelievably, he was one of those uncommon actors who based their career on actual talent, diligence, and a manner of screen that his acting was too good to miss. Made a significant impact on films, and numerous of his movies are still cherished years after. When he quit his job, Hackman had a unique gift that allows you to transform into any figure if he portrayed a tough investigator, or cruel antagonist, or a troubled hero. He became a legend because of his capacity for transformation, and his impact is seen on the actresses who pursued him. Despite the fact that he retired from film production, his name remained steadfast in the thoughts of those who enjoy movies and other actors a lot. Hollywood celebrities discussed how in a conversation, Hackman molded their trajectories. According to Robert Darrow, Hackman was one of the few actors he paid close attention to. When Darrow first started, he enjoyed how Hackman might become fully immersed in a part and make people take his words at face value. Said Hackman didn't require ostentatious stunts, and he provided silent power to Al Pacino detailed all of his actions, how Hackman transformed. His life claiming that his films were like enrolled in an excellent acting course, here called How the French Connection, made him realize how genuine and unfiltered, any day, emotions could triumph over loud acts. The actor Denzel Washington was another who given credit. Hackman Washington claimed to have grown up viewing Hackman's films and discovered a lot about simply holding the screen by. He particularly enjoyed watching him. According to Hackman's Unforgiven, he learned to play Little Bill Daggett, be subtly powerful. Washington thinking Hackman was skilled at creating even the few calmest scenes seem weighty. Will actors ever recognize Clint Eastwood, who performed and directed alongside Hackman, and Unforgiven never withheld his admiration? Eastwood referred to Hackman as one of the best actors with whom he has ever collaborated, claiming that no one could match the depth. He put his all into everything. He spoke, guiding Hackman, and occasionally stated he would simply allow the camera to continue. Since he was aware that Hackman would bring, every time Eastwood added that Hackman didn't require a lot of trees, he'd get it right the first time. Even younger performers who have never received to collaborate with Hackman discussed how they held Leonardo in high regard. DiCaprio once expressed his desire to have a conversation with him one day. He highlight how the discussion demonstrated how DiCaprio might have strong, understated acting, admired Hackman's ability to express more without more than the majority of actors could say with the entire speech. Directors had a lot to offer. To mention Hackman as well, Quentin at one point, Tarantino stated that he wanted to put in one of his films, Hackman, but by the when he inquired, Hackman had previously ceased performing. Tarantino's idea of Hackman was appropriate for one of his harsh, complex personalities and emotions. Unfortunately, he was never able to work with him. Additionally, Steven Spielberg stated that Hackman was among the players who influenced the entire Spielberg, appreciated the way the filmmaking process. Every role felt so natural because to Hackman, as like he was only acting and not even being the actors. Directors and fans expressed their admiration online. For the folklore, numerous people noted their favorite parts he performed, such as his Oscar participating in The French Connection and winning, or his terrifying turn in Mississippi Burn. Others discussed his transformation. Films that featured leading men must have a specific appearance or behavior. Hackman wasn't your typical Hollywood celebrity, had a flawless sheen that made him distinctive. Locations that are interested in movies. The Academy also paid tribute to Hackman's memory of cinematic arts and sciences, place describing him as one of the greatest actors. From the American film industry at the Time Institute, screened a number of his films at a special occasion centered around his work that can in order to honor him. The movie played some of his most well-known performances once more. His reach went beyond the Hollywood producers of films from around the globe, stated his work forced them to be more honest. Gene Hackman's legacy is more than merely regarding the honors he received or the amount. It's about how he generated money from his films, altered his acting, and provided fresh performers generations, and how individuals continue to study and adore his. What are your thoughts about his son's work, disclosures, and the court cases? Let's hear your thoughts about his will about remarks in the comments. Don't forget to hit. Thank you for clicking the like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the upcoming video.